Yeah, thanks everybody for getting on. Certainly cameras on if you can. I think it's going to be a good interaction time. So if you are willing and able, then yeah, I think you'll get out of it what you put into it. So, but I want to thank CSIA and Emerging Leaders for putting this together. I think this is going to be a cool topic. And kind of on that note, there's a couple items from CSIA before we really kick it off. So, and I am hoping you guys are seeing my slides change.
We are, yep.
Great. So these are upcoming events. Certainly hoping that today's is valuable, but it's only one of many valuable events that CSIA puts out. So put these in your calendar, grab a screenshot of this slide. And in fact, if you have not been to the conference, I would highly recommend it to you. It's an extremely valuable time. There's and only half of the value is what you get in the actual sessions. So as we're going to talk about today, which is networking, yeah, at least half the value of that conference is in the connections that you'll make. So and then John, you wanted to say a little bit in prep for the conference.
Yeah, I'll say two things. One, the conference this year has an entire emerging leaders track. So there's quite a bit there to expand beyond like the traditional like executive only kind of like attendance there. There's a lot of emerging leader piece. Additionally, we are looking for some panel members who'd be willing to speak to kind of their experience as an emerging leader and what that looks like for talent retention and kind of growth inside of a company. We've got a couple panels that we've got put together, and we've got one. So if you're interested in speaking in a panel, kind of in your experience, hopefully, assuming you've had a positive one with your company, would love to kind of get some people. Feel free to just send something in the chat, or go ahead and flag it if it's something that you're actually interested in doing. We are in need of kind of about 2 more panel members for that panel. And then, the Emerging Leaders also does, I don't know, if you haven't figured out your travel arrangements, there is like an Emerging Leaders reception. We say Emerging Leaders, but it generally, Emerging Leaders, some number of first timers and some number of Emerging Leader guiders. So it's an overall pretty big like pre-reception before the big reception that I strongly encourage you to make time for if you can travel in early enough. So that's kind of what I've got there. So.
Yeah, and the reception's a great time to make the connections. So then, tomorrow, the next day when I see you, I can be sure and grab you throughout the conference. So, all right, if there's nothing else on CSIA, we can continue. Oh, my slide didn't change. There we go. All right, so today we are talking about networking. Title of the talk is Networking, Dig the Well Before You Get Thirsty. We're really going to talk about generally what is networking, why is it important, and how do you do it. So with that, we'll kick off. I think that it is probably irrefutable at this point that networking is a vital tool for really all of today's professionals. It is kind of a necessity whether you're in sales or not. Networking isn't just a sales and business development activity like you may think. And to make that point, I want to talk about a Harvard Business Review article that I went through. And Harvard Business Review, they put out loads of resources on all number of topics, but they've got a fairly hefty stack of things on how professional networks lead to more job and business opportunities. They lead to broader and deeper knowledge. They improve our ability to innovate. They speed up advancement, and they give greater status and authority. So building and nurturing professional relationships It improves the quality of work, and it also increases job satisfaction. So it is like I said, it's a vital tool and it's kind of inescapable. So, and I think we're all, to some extent, whether we realize it or not, thirsting for it after coming out of the pandemic and being shut up in our homes and everything. Like I said, in preparation for this, I went through and I was reading Harvard Business Review stuff, and this may surprise you, but the people at Harvard are pretty long-winded when they write this stuff. So I went through this big paper, and it references all these studies. And but there was one study that really jumped out, and in this study, what they did is they looked at 200 or so lawyers at a really large law firm in the US. And what they found was that the success of any given associate, so any given lawyer at that firm, their success depended to a large extent on their ability to network effectively, both externally and internally. So most of us probably only think of networking as an external prospecting activity, but this study looked at external networking and internal networking. So you network externally, what is the payoff there? Maybe you learn about other opportunities, maybe you bring business into the company. So you're a lawyer, you're out networking, you may bring a book of business into the firm. What happens when you network internally? You're viewed more favorably among your peers and assigned more and better work. So in the study, the associates who regarded networking activities as distasteful and therefore avoided them had significantly fewer billable hours than their peers. And that's, you could make that application to many different businesses, but I think probably for CSIA companies, a lot of us are probably a lot like lawyers and have a billable hour target and goal. So that's why I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as we're starting this discussion, and to really get the ball rolling and throw us all into the fire. I've got a breakout discussion for us to do, and John, I'm guessing I can't leave the questions up during the breakout. Is that the case?
You cannot.
Okay, so either take a picture or write these down. They're not very long-winded, so I'm sure you can handle it. But here's what we're talking about. Networking. 1, what is networking? Can you define it? 2, why is it important? And then 3, and maybe the question we'll probably spend most of the time on, is what makes you not want to do it? So what is networking? Why is it important? And what makes you not want to do it? And then when you get into your group, what you need to find out is who in the group shoveled the most snow this winter. And then that person will be your spokesperson when we come back together. So figure that out first. That's first order of business. And then we'll talk networking. So John, can you set us up?
Yep.
Can you give us a sense of how much time we have too, just so people can kind of plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we're gonna do 10 minutes. Unless you never say a word, we may cut you off, but we're gonna go for 10 minutes.
Cool. Open up the rooms now.
All right, thank you, John.
So we were debating how long to have those breakout rooms for. Was 10 minutes the right amount of time? Feel too long, too short?
No, it was pretty good. Our group was conversive.
All right, are we all back?
Yes.
All right, so John, you might need to help me call out who we need to call out, but hopefully that was a good discussion, but we now need the snow shoveler spokesperson to give us a little rundown. So I don't know, can I, if I say like group one, or like, does that
I don't think people know their groups. I just asked for the volunteers. We'll get through it. There were 3 groups, so
Yeah.
you're expecting 3 volunteers.
all right, so let's have the first one. Tim. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I was the only person who had any snow, so I was de facto spokesperson from that. All these Southerners and their sunny weather. I think for the first question, we kind of talked about that networking was how to find out what's available out there and what you can do for other people, but that it is not divorced from its social aspect. That, you know, it involves quite a bit of getting to know the other person and so on, and building that trust. And the combination of both knowing what they can do and the kind of the trust and the understanding leads to what does networking get you, is that it gets those results of, hey, I know this person can do this thing, or allows to have collaborative work in the future. Hope that did a pretty good summary of what everybody said here. On the why don't we do networking, there was certainly, you know, people felt like they didn't have the skills there, like they didn't, you know, do the right tactics. It's difficult for an introvert to get excited about networking. Although once it starts happening, they recognize the excitement, but it is draining, I think was one of the things used here. And 2, it's like in the situations where networking is encouraged, like conferences or collaborations or things like that, it's great to get it going, but it's very hard to maintain that momentum outside of it. So once you're back in your offices and things like that, it feels like the momentum drops away and it's difficult to keep it going. I hope I summarized that well for everybody else.
Yeah, that's great stuff. What so let's see, Tim, and then I know Scott was in our group. So Scott, are you ready to be our spokesperson?
Sure. So I'm not sure we broke any new ground. The part about introverts struggling sometimes with network is one that particularly hit home with me. We didn't really discuss not being able to maintain that momentum. I know we didn't really discuss this in our breakout group, but one thing well, right before we got cut off, that's kind of unique to me, that can sometimes be a hindrance to our networking, is coming in from a different industry and you aren't necessarily a subject matter expert or whatever it is in the industry in which you are networking. And a lot of the conversations then could be, you know, over your head or you know, are tough for you to participate in. So if you multiply that by naturally being an introvert already, those things can be really difficult. So for instance, I came from medical device for, you know, nearly 2 decades. So coming into a systems integrator and then like going to a conference and being at a network event, you know, 6 months in and not really barely knowing the industry at all, on top of being an introvert, it just, you know, it was a struggle. We'll put it that way. That's a struggle. So going back to, you know, why do we network a little bit? I think it's kind of a negative aspect, or maybe an aspect we don't like to think about so much, but we did touch on how sometimes it could be a maybe not safety net's not the right word, but when you're actually looking for a new employer, a new job, something like that, or maybe you're even unhappy with the place that you work, your network contacts tend to be the ones you're reaching out to when you're looking for a move somewhere. So it helps you in, I guess it helps you stay employed.
Right.
Networking is a great way to help you stay employed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all good. Well, and yeah, we could talk forever about that. There's a third person. Anything, third spokesperson that you'd like to add?
Let's see. My group said a means to grow personal relationships, find opportunities. It makes relationships more fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you more favorable. Let's see. There's a fear aspect. So what makes you not want to do it? There can be some fear, some exposing, like putting yourself out there. And help. I thought this was a good one. That it's a method to put yourself out there so you can help others, right? And then why do we not do it? Sometimes we're just too busy, or we think we are, or maybe it's not prioritized, right?
Yeah. Here, let me see if I can get my slide back up. All right, we all looking back at my questions?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, so those are all really good insights. And then, it's interesting. I think this came out a little bit, but not explicitly. As I was doing some reading to prep for this, the biggest fear surrounding networking and why people tend to not do it that I found is that networking makes people feel dirty. Now, why is that? They feel that networking is transactional, that it only exists. I'm only really doing this so that I have I have a guy that's going to send me some business. I have a guy that if things don't work out where I'm at now, I can call him, whatever. So I think, and I do think that underlies some of the things that was said in the groups, which is just this concern that it appears overly transactional. So, and this is going to be kind of the jumping off point for the next part of the discussion, which is that going back to that the study. So lawyers and they're talking about the importance of networking. Well, remember the study was about the importance of networking in an individual's career. And in this analysis, what they found was that the biggest, so if you had to think that networking was going to be worth your while and go to these networking events and do things and come out of your comfort zone, what they found was that the biggest factor in determining whether or not someone was going to do that and be a good networker was if they believed that what they were doing was right. And that kind of makes sense when you hear it, and it almost sounds like too obvious to even say, but the good networkers believed that networking was good and right and even altruistic. The ones that shied away from networking tended to believe that networking was primarily transactional and self-serving. So we've established that networking is important, but how do we now move into a discussion of networking that is more than self-serving? How do you actually do it? And so in order to do that, we're going to let this Zig Ziglar quote sort of be our guide. So this is Zig. That's not his real name, but that's what everybody called him. And he has since gone on, but he said, you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. And so that's the approach. That's the approach that we're going to take to networking. So hopefully some of you know who this guy is, and what the movie is. And it's a good movie. Hopefully, however, none of you watched the movie and thought to yourself, okay, now that's how I want to run my department. Because if that's what you took away, that is not the message of the film. So, but the famous line is Alec Baldwin banging on the chalkboard and saying, always be closing. But what we're going to do is turn that and make it a little nicer, and always be giving. So try to think of networking primarily as giving and not getting. Okay, so we're a Sandler house. So in Sandler, what we say is you have to give referrals to get referrals. There's probably 10% of people will give you a referral no matter what. 10% of people will never give you a referral no matter what. But that 80 in the middle, you have to work. You have to give and get. So the last way to think about this is, if you do want to think about networking as transactional, because maybe ultimately it is transactional, that's okay. But remember that you can't make any withdrawals if you've never made any deposits. You have to give in order to get. So think of networking as making connections for others. Then your network's no longer this hub and spoke with you at the center controlling everything, but it's a web that you're just adding strands to throughout your time. So in this model of networking, you have less control over your network, but it's less work, and it's also self-sustaining. And hopefully your connection that you connected over here makes a connection to this guy, and he ends up connecting you down the line. So how do we get started? Here's what I would say. Pick a few people in your life and start referring others to them. So you probably have close relationships in your life that may or may not be in your industry that you can use as referrals, and tell them, say, hey, hey, Tim, I'm going to start. I really want to try to get better at networking, and I'm going to start, using your expertise and trying to connect you to people. And would that be okay with you? So you got to get the affirmative. But here's how this would work. So I'll say to myself, my sister-in-law does merchandise photography and social media marketing. And then I've got a friend in the neighborhood who does great work in digital advertising. And I've got a friend from jiu-jitsu who's a cybersecurity consultant. And so now I'm kind of a referral guy. So maybe it's easy for me, but if you're not, do what I'm saying here. Pick a handful of people and even tell them, hey, I'm trying to grow my network. Like I said, I'd be happy to connect you with anyone that may be looking for advice in whatever. And then you just do it. So you say, at whatever event you're at or whatever context, you say, hey, Tim, it's great that you guys are having success with your new product. My sister-in-law does a lot of product photography work. It may be worth a short conversation to pick her brain about what to be on the lookout for when you blah, 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 and, some best practices around whatever. And, I'd be happy to make that connection for you. Or, hey, John, it's awesome to hear about your aggressive growth plans. Listen, one of the other neighborhood dads is really kind of a ninja when it comes to using AI in digital advertising, kind of like we're talking about. I'd love to get you to talk to him to better understand what opportunities and maybe what pitfalls are out there. So, Lisa, that's really cool. Really cool that you're thinking about getting your MBA. You know what? A college buddy of mine in a similar line of work, he just finished his MBA 2 years ago. Let me set up a connection with you, and you can, pick his brain about whatever. So hopefully that makes sense. You're connecting people that you're talking to this backlog of people that you have, these valuable relationships that you're trying to mete out to others. So the better you get at this, however, the more you can connect people you're less close with, And when you start doing that, you're now kind of improving two relationships. So like I said, I've got, a friend, a neighborhood guy, and a sister-in-law. Well, those are good enough relationships as it is. But if I'm connecting people that I hardly know, I'm improving the relationship of the person I'm talking to and the relationship of the connection I'm making. So let's see. That's kind of a dark picture. Can you make out what that is? Does anybody
Lasso.
remember this scene? Has anybody seen this show, first of all?
Yeah.
And does anybody remember this scene? It's the darts scene if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So does anybody remember the point of Ted's monologue in this scene?
Hmm. It's been too long.
That it's always worthwhile to get to know the other person,
Hmm.
and it might give you information that will help you out later.
Yes. So I love this scene. If you've not seen the show Ted Lasso, you should at least Google the Ted Lasso darts scene. It's very good. It makes a little more sense in the context of the show, but I think you'll still get it. But the point of this kind of moving monologue, honestly, is to be curious. And so that is what that's what's going to propel you into networking successfully, because if you're curious, you don't have to be anything else. What I mean by that is you don't need a script. You don't need to have memorized all sorts of gotchas and, hey, if I say this cool line, maybe it'll work and they'll connect me with their boss. That's not how it works. In sales, just like in networking, there's no pressure because you're just curious. You don't have a script. You're just asking questions. So, it's interesting. I wasn't sure you'd say that. Tell me more about that. Or could you be more specific? Can you give me an example? Make your goal of networking to learn. If you're trying to learn and not score points, you'll get both. If you're only trying to score points, you'll get neither. So think of that as you're going into networking. Make it about learning, not about scoring points, because then you may get both. If you only want the points, you're not going to get either one. So the last thing is, this is kind of fitting. The Merriam-Webster word of the year in 2023 was authentic, which I think is interesting because, we're coming out of the pandemic. We're trying to be normal people again. And then we get sort of thrust into this world of deep fakes. You can make a video of the president saying anything you want. We've got Sports Illustrated publishing AI generated articles. All my teacher friends are worried that they're never going to be able to grade a paper again because kids will never write papers again. And inauthenticity has sort of become a meme of our age. So you all either experienced it or you at least know the story that someone you haven't talked to since high school reaches out. You're like, oh, geez, there's Tim. I haven't talked to him in, 15 years. Wonder what he's up to. And he asks you maybe 2 quick questions and then tells you about the multi-level marketing program that he's in and, wants you to buy Tupperware or leggings or whatever it is. So nobody want, so don't, and Tim, I'm sure will tell you all about that later, but you don't, but nobody wants to be perceived that way. Nobody wants to come across as, I'm just doing this to check this box. I need to check my personal interaction box before I can ask you the business question. So let me go ahead and do the, hey, how are you doing? Whatever. Then I'll get to the real stuff. So we need to be authentic. And like I said, how do you be authentic? You be curious. Ask questions. And what's the best thing about asking questions of people? It is that when you ask people questions, they get to talk about their favorite subject. Because remember, everyone's favorite subject is themselves. So when you ask people questions about themselves, they start talking about themselves, which is, whether they realize it or not, their absolute favorite thing to do. So that is where I'm going to wrap the discussion proper and move to a couple quick tips before before we maybe do a little bit of questions and discussion. So first tip, choose low-hanging fruit. Choose things that are easy for you to offer. You know, maybe like I said, maybe you've got these connections you want to make. Maybe you have something else that's of value that you can give out. You can say, you know, hey, I did a talk on, it'd be weird if I did it on networking and use this example. But if I said, hey, I did a talk with emerging leaders a couple months ago, and we talked about emotional intelligence, and I'd be happy to share that outline with you if you think it'd be helpful. It's low-hanging fruit. It will take you 15 seconds to send that over to them. Maybe you do recruit, you're responsible for some recruiting in your organization. You say, hey, I'd be happy to proofread your resume for you. You know, it's great that you're looking for a new position. You know what? It sounds like we're not the right fit for you, but you know, shoot me your cover letter and I'll read that for you. Like I said, give rather than to get. So personal, not just professional. Networking doesn't have to just be about work. And what I mean by that is it can be done in personal settings and it can be done in professional settings. And in personal settings, you can network professionally, and in professional settings, you can network personally. So let's see. Scott, that's awesome that you are starting to build some raised beds for your backyard. You know what? A coworker of mine, Tim, he's got a full breakdown of when he plants and what time, how much water they need, and which stories to read them at what time of day. I'd be happy to send that. I'd be happy to connect you guys, and Tim, be happy to help you set that up. You know, it may be anything like that. Next thing is to network laterally. So we talked about networking internally, which is networking within your own company and the importance of that. Do so laterally within your organization. So let's see, you're an engineering manager. Well, you need to network with the senior sales engineer. You need to network with someone in billing. Because those connections can pay off, years down the line. This is, after all, the emerging leaders group. At some point, you will have emerged, and those connections will pay off huge dividends. So, the senior sales engineer, if he's a rock star, he's not going to be the senior sales engineer for very long. He's going to be the sales manager. He's going to be the chief revenue officer one day. Isn't it great that you told him where you do Pilates? So, all right, last two, set goals. This is very easy. I was listening to a podcast recently, and they said that the biggest gains you can make in terms of reducing your mortality risk is going from 0 minutes of exercise a week to 60 minutes of exercise a week. So there's a drop off in the returns. If you already run 15 miles a day, going to 20 miles a day isn't going to make the change that going from 0 minutes to 60 minutes a week is going to make. And so think of this with networking. You know what? This week, I'm going to reach out to 3 people. This month, I'm going to reach out to 3 people. Set those goals for yourself and hit them. It doesn't have to be world changing. You don't have to say, I'm going to reach out to every single one of my Google contacts over the next 60 days. Make it manageable. And then the last is to just do it now. There's a few ways to do this. You're sitting down talking with someone, my sister-in-law does this all the time, record a voice message. Say, hey, I'm sitting here with John. Hey, Tim, George here. I'm sitting here with John, and we were just talking about XYZ and how we might be able to use different whatever to help accomplish that. I then shoot that over. Then that connection is made. The other way to do it now is to set a reminder for yourself. Maybe you're at a happy hour. Set a reminder for yourself that first thing tomorrow morning, I'm going to go through those connections that I made, and I'm going to send out those emails to make sure that they know that I wasn't just I wasn't just blowing smoke, and I really am committed to building these networks. So, yeah, I just want to encourage you all to, like I said, be curious, be authentic by being curious. Don't worry about having a script. Just ask questions and learn, and connect those that you already know. Remember the Zig Ziglar quote that you can get whatever you want in life just by helping enough other people get what they want. So I'm going to stop there and see if I can open it up, and maybe again, this is a networking. The topic is networking. So if you bring up a question that I don't have the answer to, I'm sure that someone else in this network does. Or comments. I mean, happy to be corrected and learn through this. So what do you think? Am I wrong? Totally wrong?
I
No,
liked everything.
go ahead.
I was saying I liked everything you said, George. Worked for me.
Yeah, me too. And I think, being a natural introvert myself and having to overcome that, I know how everybody feels, how hard it is to be in that space. And so even networking can be just even helping that other person get over that hump, right? Like, they're sitting in the corner by themselves looking at their shoes, maybe it's just a matter of coming up and saying, hey, are you having a good time, or where are you from? Like, just putting your discomfort aside for the benefit of helping that other person feel a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
Maybe one way of like tackling that, stop worrying about yourself and maybe start worrying about somebody else, and maybe it's a little easier then.
Yeah, one thing we talk about in sales a lot is to ask questions that don't have conditioned responses. So you think about walking into the store and they say, "Can I help you find anything today?" You say, "What?"
No.
Thanks, I'm just looking. So, they shouldn't even ask the question because they know you're going to say exactly that. But so maybe change it up rather than, what do you do for, what do you do for DSA? How about, what do you find most rewarding about the work you're doing? Or, what's more difficult about the job you're in now versus the job you came from? Anything that can, like I said, get around a conditioned response. What else?
Being curious is always good. Like you mentioned, like people, if they're gonna talk, they prefer to talk about themselves. So if you're asking good questions, and asking about things that they want to talk about, you're usually going to get a pretty decent response versus asking them, I don't know, anything else. But yeah, the curiosity of the person is genuine.
Yeah.
People can read through when it's not genuine. So being authentic is important.
Right. I mean, I don't think I'm off base with the you can tell when you're getting asked a personal question, so I can check the box so that I can move in to ask you who your payroll provider is.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think the goal setting part of that might actually be helpful, particularly for the introverted folks. Sometimes the spontaneity might not necessarily be there, but those folks generally are very good about following a plan, following a project plan, whatever that might be. So if you're setting concrete goals for yourself as that person, it you know, it tracks with the way that your mind works to actually go out and do those things. So I think that's a great tip.
Yeah, getting the habit is always the good part. It's like, to tie it into the original metaphor here, I don't want to dig a well all at once, but if I go and dig a wheelbarrow full every day, then eventually I'm going to have the well, right? So if I just get into the habit of doing what I
Right.
manage to do on a weekly or monthly basis, and it just becomes a part of my routine.
And for the introverted person, there are other introverted people out there that could be networked with. And they just need to, and they still like introverted folks still like talking about themselves. You just have to ask the right question to find out what it is, you know? Somebody's waiting for you to ask them about why they canceled Firefly after one season. You know, like there's somebody out there that needs you to ask that question to them so they can go off for 45 minutes about it.
I guess that's a kind
Yeah,
of a
that's
good
so-
question. As an extroverted person, what are some pointers to not scare the introverted recipient of networking?
That's a good question, and I think Becca is particularly suited to answer it.
I think I've probably scared half of you who've met me in real life. I'm kind of just out there. Maybe that's actually encouraging. I don't think I've had anybody run away when I've been like, hey, Becca. So I think there's probably some unrealistic fears of we're going to come off too strong or they're not going to understand my intentions. For the most part, people appreciate it. What I've found anyways, there's a handful who think I'm crazy and will probably avoid me. But for the most part, it's just been, put yourself out there. Scott mentioned it in our little breakout session too, preparing questions ahead of time and practicing. This is a skill that you can learn, right? And I loved how he said that I know when I go to the CSIA conference, I always come with like 3 key questions that I want to know. How do other integrators deal with? Have you found the best ERP system? How do you deal with, resource management? Sit down at breakfast with different people and just ask some of those questions. Like you said, George, there's going to be somebody who's going to be like, I just figured out the key solution to resource planning. Let me tell you how to do it.
Right.
So, yeah.
I would just say from an
Go ahead.
introvert's perspective, I have no problem with an extrovert coming up and engaging in the conversation and leading it. Like from my perspective, they're doing all that. They're doing all the heavy lifting. They're doing all the work that I didn't necessarily want to do. I'm perfectly fine with the conversation that's going to happen after all the little awkwardness at the beginning. So absolutely engage and that is not going to be off-putting to me. In my perspective, you just did the hard part, and now all I have to do is the easy part.
Right. I was just going to say, bouncing off of what Becca said, the last CSIA conference, we had just made a big switch. We had just switched CRMs, and so I went into that conference thinking, I'm going to ask people what they're doing, and how they're using HubSpot, what they're doing to make the rollout easier, and yeah, there's somebody there that just solved that problem. Anything else? I know I'm running out of time here, John. But
I don't think so. Thank you for presenting. This is going to be a lot of undertaking to do for this group, so really appreciate you taking the time to make that happen. And yeah, again, I guess a plug, if you are here in this call and you're going to the conference and you'd be interested to speak about your experience as an emerging leader on the panel, I would love 1 or 2 more people that are interested, to provide some better diversity to that panel. So I don't know if anyone here is feeling that, but I'll drop my email in the chat real quick. If you just want to send me a message, I'd love that. So.
great. Thanks, John.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate
All right.
it.
Thanks, everyone.
See y'all. Bye.